You may not realize it, but BMW's S1000XR is really the bike you need, even if you don't like the tall quasi-adv meets the Jetsons appearance. Okay, I didn't exactly just call the XR ugly, but it doesn't exactly speak to one's heart in the same way BMW's R9 does. But after you ride it, you realize that it speaks to your emotions and fires up your adrenal glands with its high-performance engine and incredibly capable chassis, which has an upright and commanding seating position. After a day spent riding the XR in Northern Ontario in Canada, in the pouring rain, I don't have all the answers for you. Having recently spent a week riding 2-up with my wife through northern Italy on a 2015 Ducati Multistrada, I can tell you these bikes are natural adversaries. But we will have to reserve a fair comparison until we get them on the same continent, on the same roads, in identical conditions. We had waited for months to ride this new adventure tourer, what BMW calls adventure sport, whose engine has been plucked from one of the most significant sport bikes ever made, the BMW S1000XR. Unfortunately, the day's forecast had me crying in my coffee. Rain was on the agenda, and it wasn't going to let up the entire day. In the S1000XR, the 999cc inline-4 puts out a claimed 160 horsepower at 11,000 RPM, versus 199 for the RR. The last S1000R we tested on the dyno put out 150 horsepower, and 77 pound-feet of torque at the rear wheel, so the XR will be in that same performance ballpark. In standard form, the S1000XR has a pair of ride modes, road and rain. Other standard fare includes automatic stability control, with basic traction and wheelie control that work in conjunction with the more basic standard ABS. But if you tick the option box for Ride Modes Pro, see pricing for all options at end of story. TC is upgraded to the more sophisticated dynamic traction control, while 2 additional ride modes are accessible including Dynamic and Dynamic Pro. The real difference here is the updated sensor box, which detects the bike's bank angle and applies TC accordingly, while also allowing more aggressive riding with less wheelie and traction intervention depending on mode selected. My S1000XR bike was heavily optioned with Ride Modes Pro, DSA, see below, and ABS Pro, see below, plus Gear Shift Assist Pro, which allows clutchless upshifts and downshifts. After starting out in the rain mode, it didn't take long for me to switch over to road. On the wet tarmac, grip from the standard Bridgestone T30 Sport Touring tires was quite good, and shutting off the DTC didn't create too much drama. I tried to get the back tire to spin under hard acceleration exiting corners in second gear, and the bike simply hooked up. It wasn't until I hit some rain-soaked dirt roads that I was able to get the rear wildly spinning. Roost. With the majority of bikes in this category using 2 or 3 cylinder power, the exceptions being the XR and the Kawasaki Versys 1000 Lieutenant, I thoroughly enjoyed this application of BMW's inline-4. The electronics allow the engine to be almost anything you want it to be, mellow and smooth, or snappy and aggressive. The engine is totally tractable, with excellent bottom to mid-range grunt, capped off by an excellent top end. Fueling is well mapped, while the rider aids do their job without making themselves unwelcome. My only complaint about the engine? It tended to deliver a fair amount of vibration through the tall and wide handlebar at cruising speed, which could get old on a long ride. The BMW chassis is anchored by an aluminum frame and a dual-sided swing arm. Wheelbase, compared to the S1000Rs, has grown by a significant 4.3 inches. At 61.0 inches, the XR wheelbase is just a tad shorter than the KTM 1190 Adventures and a tad longer than the BMW GS's. The swing arm itself is responsible for 2.5 inches of this growth, while mellower front-end geometry, 25.5 degrees of rake, 4.6 inches of trail makes up the rest. The base model BMW S1000XR comes equipped with a manually adjustable shock with provisions for preload and rebound adjustment, while the upside-down fork also adds adjustable compression damping. The long travel suspension provides 5.5 inches of rear travel and 5.9 up front. If you really want to experience the XR's chassis at its best, opt for the optional Dynamic S semi-active suspension. The rider can select from 3 preload options that can be further tweaked in the settings menu, and then select the DS setting, either road or the firmer dynamic. The system adapts damping to the riding situation in milliseconds based on information fed to the ECU from the bank angle sensor, throttle position, DTC, ABS, and spring travel sensor.